Tony, I've always admired how you've navigated different organizations. As a man of color, you seem to have done very well, and it's because you work pretty well with people under you and people over you. What advice would you give? I mean, clearly every executive is more sensitive to what's going on, but they don't always know how to react. What advice would you give to other executives about not just the Black Lives Movement, but just in general about diversity? And you're clearly doing a good job. Share some of your advice.
Yeah, and I go back to my preface. First of all, thank you for that, Vinnie. And I go back to my preface, which is we really are approaching this with a sincere spirit of humility. We've got a lot of work still to do. If you go to, anyone listening can go to equality.com. But equality.com, we are transparent about representation of folks at the company, and in that you will see we have a significant amount of work to do. For example, you'll see that just 33% of the people that work at Salesforce today are women, but just 1 in 3. You'll see that today slightly less than 3% of the folks that work for Salesforce in the US are Black. And so I wouldn't argue that we're doing a great job or that we've been successful. We have a lot of work to do, very, very focused. The advice I would offer to folks, to everyone, is find a way to be an ally. Find a way to understand and learn and listen to the lived experiences of someone, who has an identity different than your own. And that may start, purely by listening, but then once you gain your footing, by raising your voice and being a sponsor and a mentor and an advocate, being an active ally versus being a passive ally. That it certainly comes with fear, and the fear of saying the wrong thing. And at one point, I was talking to a leader about why they weren't more engaged, and the person said to me, "Closed mouth never has foot inserted." And the fear of just saying the wrong thing. And people can be at times unforgiving, if you don't get it quite right, which isn't the right way in my view to invite in and bring in allies. And so overcoming that fear, even in this moment, even as a Black man in the midst of this racial equality and justice crisis, even sometimes I'm a little fearful of, am I saying that right? Am I getting it exactly right? So we all have this. Take the time, educate yourself, find a network of people to mentor you, to reverse mentor you, and to inform you about the issues, the perspective, the opportunity, the words to use, right? People ask me, should I say, is it okay to say Black, or should I say African American, right? It was fair and legitimate questions. It's okay to say Black, but if you're stuck at that point of not having the language, because obviously language is the critical tool of leadership, you're frozen in your ability to act. So educate yourself, talk to folks of varying identities, bring them into your circle, bring them into your team, into your leadership team. And those are really, really important ways to act. And then as companies, find ways to use your platform. Use this moment to sharpen your focus, to clarify your aspirations and to clarify your values and what it is in the season and the coming seasons, the near term, the midterm, what it is that you hope to accomplish to make your company and to make society at large a better place. You think about these crises that we're facing, the pandemic, the economic crisis, racial equality and justice crisis. And this is the defining moment. And it's going to change fundamentally, every important aspect of society, right? When you think about the nature of work as it was at the end of 2019 and what the nature of work would be like at the beginning of 2021, right? And all the ideas and all the dogma of, well, you must come into the office or you can't be productive, you can't really collaborate. You think about the nature of education, right? And the way we traditionally thought about education of a school is a place, a physical place you must go to. And clearly that's not the reality today. And for the short and midterm, it won't be the reality for many kids around the world, certainly in the US. And so it's going to fundamentally change. You think about the nature of our justice system, the nature of economic opportunity. This is a moment of reset. And it's a time where dogma is stripped away and things that were long held fallacies of you must be in this physical location in order to do X. People are seeing the reality of new ways to collaborate and inventing and imagining new ways. And the challenge that's ahead of us is to take this moment and to use those opportunities to make the world a more equal place, a more fair place, with more opportunity for all. That's synergistic, and that's going to create a more vibrant recovery to our economy and economies around the world, and create more opportunity for everyone. So I say, aim high, think about the reset, think about these fundamental things and how we use this moment to reinvent and reimagine these core aspects of society for the better, so that we're sitting here, when the pandemic has passed and the economy hopefully is recovering, still faced with racial equality and justice crisis, and we're doing all that we can to make the world a better place.
Evolved. So what we're seeing now is a really focus on belonging, and the difference we say is diversity is a fact. Do you have diverse representation or not? Inclusion is really a behavior. Are you creating equal opportunities across the board? Are you including everyone equally? Belonging is really the sentiment. How does a person feel? Do they feel like they're part of a culture that cultivates belonging? And so the belonging is turning out to be the most important, or becoming the more important one, but you have to really look at all of them. Not just the diverse representation, but that's why we call it VIBE: value, inclusion, belonging, and equity. Go beyond representation to make sure that you put as much emphasis on the inclusion, belonging, and equity as well. And then the next piece is really creating that accountable system. So how do we help organizations go from goal setting to goal getting? How do we provide what we call accountable analytics, not actionable, but accountable? And that's how they can go from intentions to getting the outcomes. So we'll talk a little bit about that. I think at the heart of our approach is being able to, first see your outcomes. So what are you seeing? That's the VIBE index. What are the outcomes I'm getting from my diversity and belonging efforts? Where am I, and where do I have the greatest impact for change? And then based on the outcomes I'm getting, really looking to the factors that are causing the reasons behind why you're getting the outcomes that you have, and then being able to take the actions. And we say Workday HCM, but really what that means is talent acquisition, talent optimization, compensation for pay equity, and of course the employee experience, right? And then what's really important is looking at and understanding all the unique attributes of your employees that make up their experience. So what's happened in the past, traditional systems, they looked at outcomes at the employee level. So this looks good. If I look at average promotion, average belonging, average attrition, that all looks great. But we have to really look at the intersectionality. So not just male and female, African American and Asian, but combining the connections between the fact that I'm female and Asian, and I may be Generation X. So really starting to look at the intersections, because it's these intersections that are really defining their sense of belonging, their sense of inclusive, and really tailoring their experience. So this is what's really different about the VIBE Index. And what's unique about our offering is where we've been investing since Karen Taylor started 3.5 years ago, is really making a robust capability to capture, to self-identify across all of these different dimensions. So, we have customers with 65, 85 gender codes, all the different definitions and breakdowns of ethnicity that you want to capture, to sexual orientation, to pronouns, to religion. So we support all of these attributes, and these are the attributes that we can bring together into what we call intersections, multiple dimensions. And what's important about that is if we drill into that 80% average belonging across all employees, and we start to look at it as intersections, we see a completely different picture. So what we thought we had a good sense of belonging, we're finding that male Asians are not having as high of a sense of belonging as we see with male and female white people. And then this underrepresented minority is URM. So that's really important. So this is really the journey that we went on with Workday, and that our customers are now going on. Is in the past, analytics never brought intersection into play. It only looked at gender, or it only looked at race. It didn't look at the combination.
Well, it's interesting because when I look back at when I started my career, and you really think about everything that's happened in the last 45 years, when you really think about it, you realize how much things truly have changed. That said, I don't necessarily think they've changed enough. I don't think they've changed quickly enough. But if you look back in 1975, when I started my career, it was very, very often I was the only female doing what I did, participating in any kind of activities, meaningful activities. I started working for a small manufacturing company. And at that time, I was the only woman that was not in a clerical or an administrative role. I had the advantage of having personal support for doing whatever I wanted to do. And that came from my parents. My mother was a teacher. My father was a barber, and he was the son of poor Italian immigrants. Yet somehow he drew the conclusion that it really shouldn't be any kind of being a woman or any other reason shouldn't hold you back from doing what you wanted to do. And the real keys to success were doing what you wanted to do and working hard. And I've carried those kinds of lessons through my life, and I never let those predetermined preconceptions limit me. Unfortunately, I was the exception rather than the rule. So,
do you think it's because I've noticed with my daughter, she was a very good chess player, and noticed she hit a ceiling too because there were just too many men and not enough women. Do you think that is a phenomenon that applies in technology too? You said you were the only lady at one point in technology. It's not quite that bad now, but still
right.
See women just don't seem to persist quite as much.
I don't have a good explanation for it, except to say that in many cases, there used to be very conscious bias in the workplace against women. Women were expected to be in subservient support roles as opposed to leadership roles. That used to be very conscious. I think that has gone away, but there's still a lot of unconscious bias that people fall into that trap of making those kinds of assumptions. And I think that holds women back from pursuing those kinds of careers. And it also limits their opportunities. They rewatched the movie Hidden Figures.
Yes.
And, boy, that hit home. It really did. And I'll tell you, those women are so inspirational. They didn't set out to change those biases, but they did by simply getting the job done, educating themselves and doing the work. Biases be damned. Those women really made a huge impact on the space industry. I'm glad someone finally made a movie about it because they truly were hidden figures.
And, I think that is, to me as an immigrant, I just look at, like I said, the opportunities here. It's just unbelievable how generation after generation a worker has found, like you mentioned your cousin. I mean, how does a welder become a process improvement guy? Because you just look for opportunities, you navigate your way around, and they're there. You just have to grab them. So, Cindy, this has been wonderful.
I think that Silicon Valley is guilty of ageism. Probably with the renewed emphasis on racial diversity particularly for underrepresented people in Silicon Valley, the ageism may, take a back seat. But I think a lot of the ageism in Silicon Valley doesn't need to occur. And in fact, there are plenty of role models to show why it shouldn't occur. I will grant you that consumer technology has always been, in the province of young people because they see consumer trends. It's impossible to imagine, that you could be, roughly our age and running TikTok. You just wouldn't see the way things are unfolding. And you wouldn't be able to react to it. But when you look at the enterprise tech sector, my gosh, the previously mentioned Bill McDermott is 59 or 60. Tom Siebel, you interviewed Ed Abbo, is number 2 a few weeks ago. Great interview, by the way. But, Tom is going to be 68 in September, and he's leading, C3.ai after, enormously successful career. You think about Dave Duffield at Workday, starting Workday in his 60s and still being involved in the company. I mentioned Hasso Plattner, one of the founders of SAP, leading a renaissance of the company quite late in his life. And I think that enterprise tech really lends itself to that more, to the person who maybe they're not the coder they once were, but they see the big picture in a way. They have industry knowledge, they have wisdom, they've seen this play or that play before, they've been to that rodeo. And, in the long sales cycle of an enterprise software sale, all of those things really help. And so, you see leadership there. Secondly, I think this low code, no code environment that is changing enterprise software, much as much as decades before, Apple learned how to hide the complexity of everything it did and made everything beautifully vertically integrated and beautiful to look at and to operate. And as enterprise software goes that way, it's going to open up opportunities for people who aren't cutting edge coders, which again is sort of a door that favors the young, versus the old. There's fascinating brain research around when we bloom and why and where we bloom. And there are certain professions where you do see people blooming early. Rapid fire coding under a time pressure favors the young. It's just the way young brains are built. It's like young Major League Baseball pitchers throw with a greater velocity than they will, 10 years later. But if they evolve as a pitcher, they learn more pitches, they learn to be crafty, they learn to be canny, they can read the batter's body language, they become more disciplined about studying film, and they can have very effective careers, even though they aren't the speed demons that they once were. And I think as we get into our 30s, 40s, and 50s, we have greater capacity to lead, to inspire, to communicate, to multi-process. And then as we get into our 60s and 70s, we have this great ability to tie things together and to teach. That which has been called wisdom throughout the millennia. There's a neuroscientist at NYU named Elkanan Goldberg, who in his own case, in his late 60s, he was coming up with intuitions that would be proven out when he did the actual disciplined math and science around intuition. It would turn out his intuition would be more often correct than not. His batting average for intuitions proving to be accurate got higher and higher. And his theory, and it's a controversial theory, but his theory is that the networks that connect the two sides of our brain, the logical side, which is also the memory storage side, along with the side that likes stimulus and novelty and creativity, there's more and more communications. It's almost like the brain is saying, how do you look at this? How do you see the world? Well, I can understand why you're exciting, but look, when I stack it up against previous things, that looked kind of similar, it didn't really pan out. And so that gets better as we get older, provided we stay in good health. We haven't had a stroke. We stay physically fit and mentally alert. We don't become couch potatoes. So I think it's all very encouraging. I would say, practically speaking, and I've gone on here, but this is an important point. I think too many industries and companies have what we'd call an up and out career path. You get raises and you get more responsibility. You have people reporting to you, and up and up and up you go until, let's say you're in your middle 50s and somebody in the finance department of your company says, my God, we pay that person a lot of money, A. And two, there's this person 10 years younger than this that we need to either make room for in upper management levels, or we're going to lose that person. So now the person in their middle 50s gets fired. They get a buyout package if the company's healthy, but they get, they're let go. And I think if we could replace that with sort of a career arc, if we could come to a common agreement, if we could have a rational discussion where adults are talking to their, good people, good contributors, with an adult-minded mentality, are talking with HR and legal and negotiating a backside of the arc career package. It might look like this. You give up your title. You're no longer executive vice president. You're going to give up a big chunk of your compensation package. But you also will get to give up working 60 and 70 hours a week. Let's negotiate something. How much do you want to work? Oh, 30 is good enough for me. And I want to have some outside projects. Okay, let's negotiate a package that will reflect that. And then here are your new duties. They're going to evolve over time, so you become an internal consultant and a coach. And I think once you remove the title, then you remove and people know where they are on the career arc, then you remove the kind of defensiveness you see sometimes upper level executives where they undermine, the careers of people who might take their jobs, because it's now understood you're on the other side of the arc. I would love to see, I'm told that HR departments and legal departments just say it's a legal landmine if you go there, but some visionary companies and some leaders like Mark Benioff, who have a lot of moral clout in the Valley, I'd love to see him take a look at that. He wrote a column in Forbes on Sandy Koufax, the great Brooklyn and LA Dodgers pitcher, and how he was a late bloomer, and which confounds people because Sandy Koufax retired at 30. How could somebody who retired at 30 and, was a Hall of Fame first ballot choice and is considered the greatest left-hand pitcher in Major League history, how could he be a late bloomer? Well, he had two distinct careers. His first 6 years as a Dodger, mostly in Brooklyn, but a couple years in LA, were really mediocre. And then he got one piece of advice that proved to be valuable, and that is, don't throw so damn hard. Sandy, you're rearing back so far you can't even see home plate. Your problem is you're wild, and batters can wait you out. Throw 95% of, just do everything at 95% speed, and with your arm, that'll be enough. And he learned it, and it just magically transformed his career. I often think, as we all of us stumble through life, what if there was that person who said, if you change this one thing in the way you see things,